Hi, I'm Linda. My ghost story took place when I was a fledgling paranormal investigator. I was about 19 years old and I had been summoned by an elderly lady to talk to her about what was going on in her home. At the time, I lived in Montreal, and this was a small town just outside of Montreal called Hudson, Quebec. Beautiful old home. It's very stately, and this woman had been having some issues. So things had been moving, things had been thrown around the house. Her kitchen cupboards had opened and closed mysteriously many times, and she felt very, I guess, skittish is a good word in her home. So she wanted to find out what was going on. And I went out there to investigate, talk to her a little bit, maybe get a tour of her home to see what was happening. So I arrived, she gave me a tour, we walked around the house. It did feel at the time that something was following me around her house, so it was a bit eerie and scary and odd. But the real stuff started to happen when I sat down with her in her living room. Beautiful living room, absolutely gorgeous, high ceilings, big fireplace. I sat down with her to talk about what was happening. I took notes, and she explained that things would move and things would be thrown. So, of course, being a fledgling paranormal investigator, I asked the question, well, are you sure that these things aren't a figment of your imagination? And as soon as I asked that question, the room got icy cold, and this huge, big crystal ashtray on her marble fireplace mantle flew off the mantle and grazed my ear and hit the wall in back of me and shattered into a million pieces on the floor. And she didn't seem very plussed by it. She was, well, just very nonchalant about it. Well, this happens all the time. And at that point, my heart was in my throat, and something like that had never happened to me before. And it was absolutely terrifying. So that is my very first ghost story.
John Connors from the Connors Brothers. We were asked to share a spooky story, and we Connors Brothers have quite a doozy.
We do. Yeah, it was quite the experience. We were recording our tracks for our maple flavored album that came out in 2015 at the Sharon Temple, which, of course, many people know have quite the tales about it.
Quite. And a lot of history, especially history around music. So what we were explained was that the Sharon Temple, the Children of Light, part of their worship at service was very much involved with music.
Right, and it was a break from resisting music being part of spirituality. Right? So that was a big deal.
Late one night, around the stroke of midnight, we were recording
on a cold, wet October evening.
We were recording after hours. We were given permission to record in the building after usage. It was close of the season, so cold. It was dark.
I'm going to say it was about 11 o'clock at night, probably at that point in time. Yeah.
So while we're playing, we're in the middle of songs, and we stopped cold. And certainly for all of us,
like we were about to start the track, right? And then we just, what did we hear?
The small faint sounds of child laughter.
And it sounded like it was coming from the rafters above.
It was just part of the building. And so for that time, we all chills. So included, we'll make sure that there's a YouTube link. We actually have a recording of that. So check out the YouTube
link. Caught on video, caught on audio, because everything was queued up and ready to record.
Sharon Temple's not in an area that's close to like subdivisions. It's a little bit, it's not necessarily off the beaten path, but not necessarily in the thicket of a subdivision.
No, there's quite the yard in front, and it was late, so there's
nobody else on the ground
playing in the park. No, and I thought it was interesting too because we were recording the Maple Leaf Forever, which was originally written in 1867. So maybe this song was of interest to this young spirit.
Right, and at the end of the experience, when we went and told the curator and other folks who work at the Sharon Temple, they mentioned that other people find experiences that are positive, specifically surrounded with music. So, and so that moment of music being what was the conduit to the spirit world. So check out the YouTube video, take a listen, and sharing some local scary stories.
Hi there. My name is Ryan, and I want to start off by saying I've always considered myself a skeptic. When I hear people tell stories, I always feel like there's usually an explanation for things. So I'm not easily swayed. That changed one night a couple years ago. I was working at another library system in a building that happened to be, I think, one of the older buildings in the town. And people had always told me about strange things, weird things that had been happening, things that they had seen, things that they had heard. And again, I just chalked it up to an old building, old pipes, whatever it could be. So this one night, I'm working. It's just my manager and myself. And we're in the branch. It's about 8:45. We were closing at 9. So we're doing our normal nightly routine, walking around, letting people know that we'll be closing soon, making sure people were packing up, not leaving anything behind. Usually it went off without a hitch. There's no issues. On this one night, I was on the second floor of the building, and I could hear what sounded like laughter, clear as day. Laughter and kind of like whispers, that like and at first I didn't know where it was coming from. It was almost like this disembodied voice was bouncing off the walls. And as I was getting closer to the source, it became more and more vivid. And it was clear. It was definitely at least like two people, because it was two different tones, and they just kept kind of whispering back and forth and laughing back and forth. And I realized it was coming from the washroom, our accessible washroom on the second floor. So I walked over to it, and I figured, you know what, it's probably just a couple of teenagers. Maybe they're playing a prank, playing a joke. Maybe they were just, being silly. So I walk over to it and I knock on the door. Hi there, it's library staff. The library's going to be closing soon. Please pack up your stuff and leave the building. The voices never stopped. They kept going. The laughter kept going. And it was almost like they were just, telling jokes back and forth to each other. But I couldn't quite make out what they were saying. But I figured after I knocked, they'd leave. I didn't want to stand there and wait for them to come out. I feel like that was a little too embarrassing in case it was just a couple teenagers just playing around. And so I walked away, and I kept going on with what I was supposed to do. About a minute or so later, I came back, and I could still hear them. So again, I knock on the door. Hi there, it's library staff again. The building is closing. We need you to pack up and leave. What was weird is they never stopped to hear what I was saying. Normally, people are doing something, kids are doing something. The minute you bang or the minute you knock, they go quiet. They're waiting to hear what you have to say, but that never happened. The voices just kept going. Now, at this point, I'm getting frustrated. And now it's after 9. The building should be closed. We should be on our way home, but now we're dealing with this. So I decided, let me go grab the manager. I walk downstairs. I tell her what's going on. I tell her what's happening, and she's convinced, it's probably just a couple of teenagers getting carried away. Maybe they're up to something. She grabs her master key, and she says, let me go up. Let me check. If I need to, I'll open the door. So I go with her. I follow behind. She gets up there, and she's a little more forceful than I was. Instead of knocking, she gives a good bang on the door and says, manager here. The library is closed. You need to pack up and leave immediately. Same thing. Voices never stop. The laughter never stops. So she says, okay, I'm coming in, puts the key in the lock, turns it. And we're expecting, as soon as she opens the door, to see two teenagers run out, whatever it could be. But she opens it, and there's no one in there. And we shared this moment with each other where we looked and we kind of said, wait, that happened, right? Like, you heard it. It wasn't just me. And it's that moment where you're thankful you shared it with someone, because you know that if it was just you and you went and told someone that story, they wouldn't believe you. But it was both of us. And how could we both hear and experienced the exact same thing. Well, that had happened, and we honestly didn't really talk about it much. And it was a couple weeks later, we were at a staff training, and somehow the subject of spooky stories and strange things happening at the library, it came up. And someone at the desk started talking about this weird thing that had been happening to them when they were working the night shift at the same branch. And they had told us that they would hear what sounded like kids running between the book stacks, usually after hours, once everyone was out of the building and it was just them. And more often than not, they would hear laughter and what sounded like people talking. And it would always be coming from an empty room or a storage room that when you would open the door, there was no one there. And I kept my mouth shut. I didn't really want to say anything, and I just listened to what they had to say. But after hearing what had happened to other people and how similar it was to what happened to me, that's when I stopped being so skeptical about some of the weird things that were going on. And that's my story. Hope you enjoyed. Good night.
So my ghost story happened in the house that my family currently resides in now. We've always felt like there was a ghost in the house. We would always feel like there would be somebody standing behind us, and when we turned around, there wouldn't be anybody there. Somebody would touch our hair, and again, turned around, nobody was there. Doors would shut, doors would open, you'd hear a little bit of voices, and then when you would go to check, there wouldn't be anybody there. So the worst experience that I had was around Christmas time. It was very snowy, very bad winter, so much so that my family and I had just wrapped up watching TV. We all decided that it was time for bed, and before we had a chance to turn off the TV and the lights and anything that we were using, the power went out. So my mom decided that I would sleep on the couch, and when the power came back on, I would go around and turn off anything that had been left on, and then I would go to bed myself. So it was Christmas time, so our Christmas tree was in the corner of the living room where I was sleeping, and my mom liked to decorate it with lots of bells. So every inch of this tree had bells on it. So I had gone to sleep, and it was probably around 2 a.m., and I was woken up by one bell on the tree just ringing, as if somebody was standing beside the tree, had grabbed onto that one branch, and was forcefully making that bell ring really loud and really aggressively. So I had looked up, saw one part of the tree moving, decided not going to deal with this. This is just normal everyday life of our house. I put the covers over my head and went back to sleep. Around, I think it was 4 a.m., I then woke up again because our power had come back on. I then went around, turned off everything, went upstairs to my room, shut the door, put the blankets over my head again because I was still freaked out. And then I went to bed. And then the next day I explained what had happened to my mom and creeped her out. And so yeah, that's my ghost story.